I figured since fair season's over in Ohio, I take some downtime and talk about like certain memories I have at certain parks and fairs. And basically, my favorite amusement park was Geauga Lake, but it was closed down 12 years ago. But I wanted to talk about some things I remember from there ever since I was a little kid. And the first thing I remember is that they used to have a ride there called, it used to be a Matterhorn ride, just like what Cedar Point still has. But it was called Yukon Yahoo. And I actually still remember this, even though I was only about 3 or 4 years old. But I remember me and my mom going on it, and I screamed bloody murder the whole damn ride. Like I didn't like it. And and I was still screaming bloody murder when I got off, and I actually never got back on this ride again until I was probably like 11, maybe 12. And there was another time. This was in, I believe, 1997. It had to have been 1997 or 1998 because that was when they installed the Mr. Hyde's Nasty Fall ride. And what that was, it was like a drop ride. It's similar to the old Demon Drop that Cedar Point had. And they used to have a bar at Geauga Lake, but I don't remember exactly where it was. But my dad actually went there and started day drinking, and he got kind of drunk and ended up going on. See, he was apparently like looking for us, but he had been drinking, and us being me and my mom, and he ended up in the line for Nasty Fall, and he went on it and got off and came up to us and started talking to us, and then he went right back in line for it. He must have done this probably 5 or 6 times, and we basically had to wait for him to sober up so that we could leave. He had done this probably, I don't know, I'd say around 11 in the morning, and we had to stay there till about 7 or 8 for him to be sober enough to drive back home. And the reason I'm telling that story is because today marks 9 years since my dad passed. But he used to love that park too. And I have like various assorted memories of going on different rides there, like the casino, which was essentially a updated version of the old Trabant ride. And that was one of the few rides that they installed in 1991. And one of the others was the Mirage ride, which was this giant magic carpet type ride. And they kept the ride, but even after Six Flags bought the park, they kept the ride, but they rethemed it and called it El Dorado Drive-In. But it didn't run like 70% of the time after they rethemed it, so I didn't get to go on it much. But I do remember my mom and dad wanted me to go on that ride with them. And back then, like any ride that I didn't know anything about when I was like real little, I didn't want to go on it because I was afraid it would make me sick for some reason. And it was funny because right when we were about to get on the ride, somebody actually did get sick on it. So I was saved from going on it. And then there was, I remember I used to love the Music Express ride there a lot, but they never ran it backwards. And I remember being on Geauga Lake Today forums, and somebody mentioned that there's a bolt going through the center of the control panel, so for some reason it made the ride unable to go backwards. And I love that ride mainly because of the theming and because they played a lot of old music on it, or older music. And I remember after, it was the year after Six Flags bought the park, they had like taken all the theming off the Music Express. They painted all the seats yellow, and they stopped playing music on it. And they put it in like this generic looking building. And what they ended up see, when Six Flags owned the park, I'll say like the operations were, I'm trying to be nice here, less than optimal. I'll just put it like that, because it would take them about 5 minutes to load the Music Express, but they would only run it for 45 seconds. So it's basically like what Matterhorn at Cedar Point is like now. Like, it takes them several minutes to load the ride, but then they only run it for 30 to 45 seconds. They don't even run it at full speed. But that day that me and my mom went on it, they ran it pretty damn fast. Like, I remember my mom was still in shock when she got off the ride. So, but then after that year, which was 2002, they uninstalled the ride, because that was, I believe, the year before they expanded the park to SeaWorld. They were supposed to bring the ride back for SeaWorld, for like the Happy Harbor side, because that's what SeaWorld became. And I had heard a couple of rumors as to what they were going to call the ride. Like, one of them was Sea Storm and the other one was Tidal Wave. But they never reinstalled the ride. They kept it in the boneyard. And the boneyard is where they keep like old rides and stuff like that, for those who don't know. But I remember like really missing that ride. And there was a time that me and my parents went to Geauga Lake in, I believe this was 2005, and like it had been sunny like the whole morning that we were there, because we got there right when the park opened that morning. And I did some of the rides. I did like Starfish, and Starfish is the Wipeout ride they had, which replaced the Trabant ride that they used to have. But I remember going on that. El Dorado Drive-In was down, and a Time Warp, which was the double inverter, wasn't running that day yet. So I went to the back. I went on Hay Baler, which is what Yukon Yahoo became after it was. That ride has such a weird history, but I'll get into that probably a different time. But I remember going on Texas Twister, which was the top spin they had. And it was the first top spin to be installed in an amusement park in the U.S. And I went on it, and like right when the ride started, this pop-up shower came, and the ride kept flipping over, and I kept just getting hit with all these freaking raindrops. It felt like I was being hit with hail though, because it was just flipping so fast, and then it hurt terribly. Like I got off. I was like, I don't want to go on this again until the rain stopped. I was like 16 years old, and then I went on Double Loop. And that ride was going like a lot faster or it felt like it, since it had just been raining. And I remember going on what used to be called, I don't remember what the name became. I think it was Dominator. It used to be Batman Night Flight. And that was kind of weird to see, because that was right after Cedar Fair ended up buying the park. So it was like the year after that. And so that was in 2005. So that would have been when Cedar Fair bought the park. Because I remember going on Batman Night Flight, and they literally cut all the Batman symbols out of all of the seats, because like all the cushions on the seats used to have the Batman logo on them, but they just haphazardly cut them all out. And then later on, I went on time warp because it was finally running. I got strapped in, and from what I remember, the way that ride worked was it was a chance inverter ride, but it had two sides to it. But they only ever really ran one side. I don't think I ever seen them run more than one side. But there's a main control panel, and then there's a control panel on the side of the gondola that they use to, I believe, lock the seats and everything. And the seats had at least two fail safes to make sure you don't fall out. There's like a lap bar of some sort, and then there was like a over the shoulder restraint that locked two. And what happened was like this initial person locked us in, but it was weird. It was weird. Like this girl came up, and I guess the guy had to go to break or something, so he let this girl run the ride instead. And everything was going fine for like the first 30 seconds, and then the ride just stopped. It stopped upside down in midair, and I'm just sitting there laughing. I'm just like laughing my behind off. My mom's on the ground freaking out. My dad pointing up at me laughing. We were stuck upside down for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I want to say. And then the guy came back and he let us all off the ride. And I remember the last time that I went to Geauga Lake was about, I think, about a week before they said that the park was going to close. And that was back during the time I was having all these psychological issues with amusement rides, where I couldn't go on any because of something that happened at a fair that I had gone to in 2005. But basically, we took my friend Zach with us, me and my parents. And by this point, Cedar Fair had owned the park for about 3 years. And there'd been like a shopping center built across from it. The road was expanded to like 4 lanes at least. And because it used to be, I think the road started out as either 2 or 4 lanes, and then across from it was just this big field full of weeds and abandoned gas station. It was like that for years until Six Flags bought the park. But I had taken motion sickness medicine that day, and it screwed me up. I couldn't go on anything. So Zach ended up going on all the rides and everything. And there's pictures of him going on like Time Warp and Starfish and some other type of rides that they had. And I remember thinking like, man, I hope next time that we come, I'm able to actually go on the rides. But that never ended up happening because they announced that the park was going to close on September 21st, 2007. And I only remember the exact day because it was about 3 weeks after my 19th birthday when they announced it. So I was not happy about that. But I've had so many great memories of the park. And I wish I had gotten to meet, what was the man's name? I think it was Rotor Fred. Was that his name? He became Yukon Yahoo Fred and then Hay Baler Fred because they uninstalled the rotor after, I believe it was after Six Flags bought the park. It was like the same year they uninstalled that ride. And it was funny because some of the rides that they had after Six Flags ended up buying the park, or actually right before, some of those rides ended up at Wyandotte Lake. And Wyandotte Lake doesn't even exist in the same way that it used to. One of the rides that went there was their Tilt-A-Whirl. It was sent to Wyandotte Lake to replace the Rocco plane they had that was called Barracuda, because like Barracuda kept having all these mechanical issues. I remember it being broke a lot of the time when I went to Wyandotte Lake that year. And they sent some kiddie rides over too, like the little turtle ride and the Guppies ride and some other stuff I can't remember. But once the new quote unquote Wyandotte Lake opened, Jungle Jack's Landing, there was a man that apparently used to run the Tilt-A-Whirl at Geauga Lake, and he bought the Tilt-A-Whirl from Jungle Jack's Landing and installed it at his family fun center. So now he has the ride. But I'm wondering where some of these other rides from Geauga Lake went, like the hay baler. I heard the hay baler was actually scrapped. I'm not sure about that. And I know the Music Express sat in the friggin' boneyard forever, so it's probably way past unsalvageable. So I believe Yo-Yo went to Carowinds, and a couple other rides from there went to Carowinds. Try to remember. The main one I want to know is where the hell Flying Scooters went to. Because I remember not seeing that after a while. And one of the cool things about Geauga Lake before Six Flags bought it was all the really cool flat rides that they had. They weren't really focused on coasters so much. And I loved going on all the flat rides they had. Like, even when Six Flags bought the park and installed more of them, like, I was on board with that. But it seemed like Six Flags' MO was kind of to try to beat Cedar Point at their own game, but it didn't work out that way. So now we have all these parks that are basically all about roller coasters, but not much else. And I just remembered another really cool Geauga Lake memory. But this one is getting more and more elusive the older that I get, because this happened probably when I was 3 or 4 years old too. There used to be a ride in the front of the park. I think it was just called Rocket Ship. And it was this tower. It was a tower sitting on top of a little building. And from what I remember, you climb these stairs that are inside the building to go up to the bottom of the tower. And then you got in these rocket ships. And it was like a giant rocket ship swing. I don't remember how fast it went or anything. I don't think it went very fast, but I remember going on that a couple of times with my mom. And even though my mom was afraid of heights, and it was weird because I guess that was a ride that got put in storage somewhere, and a couple of the cars from it came out to be used for certain events, but they never reinstalled the ride. So I kind of wonder what was up with that. I remember seeing Mind Eraser from the road for the first time, because for those uninitiated, basically Geauga Lake is kind of, or was kind of in the middle of nowhere, because you had to drive through Solon, Ohio to get there, and then through Aurora, Ohio. And Aurora didn't have much other than Geauga Lake. So you're driving down this road that had all these hills, and at one point there's like a church on the left side, and you just keep going, and then there's a field on the right, but then you look on the left and there's an amusement park just out of nowhere. And they used to have a corkscrew roller coaster just like Cedar Point, but we went in 1996 and they had uninstalled the ride and they replaced it with Mind Eraser. And I remember asking my dad, like, what's that ride? What's that ride? I would always see Skyscraper first. And it used to be I would see Skyscraper and the rocket ship ride. But then it became Skyscraper and Mind Eraser. Oh, here's another kind of messed up story from when Six Flags owned the park. They used to have this ride. It was kind of like Wicked Twister at Cedar Point, only it had one spiral instead of two. The name of it escapes me. It was Superman something Escape. I don't remember the name right off the top of my head. But I was waiting in line for it with a friend, and they were loading the ride up, and then this kid was like struggling to get in the seat. He was probably 6 or 7 years old. And what ended up happening was he wasn't all the way in the seat, but his restraint came down and it pinned like his back. I don't know how to explain it, but basically he wasn't all the way in the seat, but the restraint was down. And they were getting ready to launch the ride. Like, they almost gave the all clear. And everybody's like, no, don't start the ride. Don't start the ride. And they actually got to the guy in time and made him not launch the ride. And they basically let the restraints up and the kid kind of fell down. And then they had to help him back up into the seat. But that was scary. Like, he could have been killed. That was kind of endemic of how Six Flags sort of ran that park. They either had their operations were too slow, or they tried to rush their operations and stuff like that what happened. So in that way, Six Flags getting a park wasn't really that great of an idea. But I'm trying to think of what else I can talk about. I do also remember not knowing what the hell Rotor did, because Rotor, I don't know how many people watching have seen a Rotor ride or what it looks like on the outside, but you can't really tell what it is just by looking at it. You have to actually go up to the top of the ride to see what it looks like. And that was a mystery that I never figured out till I was like 15 years old. I never knew what the hell that ride was. I just remember I would see it when I was a kid, and I would see people stand at the top of the stairs looking down into whatever the thing was, and I never figured out what the hell the thing was. And my dad didn't know either. And then like years later, I found out that it was just a ride that is like this kind of cylinder shaped thing that just spins around and holds you against the wall, and the floor drops. And that was about the time I heard of Rotor Fred. So it was just good times all around at that park. I kind of wish I was born sooner so I could see some of the older rides they used to have, like the Calypso and the Super Cat and all those types of rides. But anyway, thanks for listening to my ramblings. Have a good night.